With Earth on the brink of collapse, scientists discover a new planet that can support human life in the year 2063. The planet appears on screen as a woman explains that it is suitable for human colonization. She goes on to mention that a scouting mission should be dispatched to the planet. Given that the journey will take 86 years, the crew aboard the mission will need to reproduce during the voyage, ensuring that the third generation will be the ones to arrive at the planet. The crew is genetically designed on Earth by merging the genes of top scientists. A man discusses the rationale behind this strategy, explaining why the crew is being specially engineered and raised from childhood to carry out this mission. The following step involves determining when the crew will be ready to depart. The younger they are, the longer the resources can be conserved. However, Richard, the man in charge, is concerned that they may not be adequately prepared to handle the complexities of space travel independently. Later, Richard enters a facility where the child crew is being raised, donning full protective gear. As he steps into their living quarters, the children cheer upon seeing him. Richard checks on their educational progress before tucking Christopher, Sella, and Zach into bed. When Zach expresses fear, Richard reassures him that he is safe. The following day, Richard speaks with the woman overseeing the mission and suggests that he should accompany the children to raise and protect them. Richard's inclusion in the mission would also allow the launch to happen in 4 years rather than 7. The mission then launches with Richard leading. The shuttle docks with the mission ship, Humanitas. They board the ship and locate their quarters, with Richard taking a final glance at Earth. A decade later, the children have grown into adults and are shown beginning their daily routines aboard the ship. Their first lesson addresses fertilization, which will start during the 24th year of their lives for the second generation. The crew carries out their tasks in a robotic manner, drinking a blue liquid. Meanwhile, Christopher and Zach listen to classical music. Sella strolls through the ship, gazing at the space around them. Later, she confides in Richard, expressing that the crew's lives feel insignificant. In an effort to comfort her, Richard shares pictures of his grandparents and emphasizes the importance of securing the future. That night, Christopher struggles to sleep and listens to the sounds of the ship. The following day, while Richard and Christopher are in the hydroponics bay inspecting the plants, a message regarding water toxicity flashes on Christopher's screen. Christopher questions Richard about the message, suspecting it's related to a chemical that isn't being filtered from their urine. However, Richard dismisses his concerns, showing skepticism. Later, Christopher asks Zach about the T56J ingredient, and they both ponder why the information isn't accessible. That night, they return to investigate further. Christopher bypasses the firewall and successfully retrieves the information. They discover that the chemical ingredient is present in the blue liquid they drink. While Zach initially believes it to be a digestion aid, they realize it has additional effects on their personalities. The chemical dulls their senses and makes them docile, reducing their desires and pleasure responses. Essentially, they're being drugged and pacified to prevent natural reproduction and avoid overpopulation on the ship. They decide to stop consuming the blue liquid. Later, they share their findings with Kai and Julie, including details about a hidden compartment on the ship. During a later session with Richard, Christopher confronts him, claiming that he's been dishonest, though he only brings up the unmarked pod 23. Richard explains that the mission likely withheld information for a reason, suggesting that the pod could be intended for the third generation. After the session, Richard sends a message to Earth, requesting permission to be transparent with the crew so that they don't lose trust in him. However, it will take time for the message to reach Earth. The following day, while standing in line beside Selah, Christopher finds himself fantasizing about her. During lunch, he continues to glance at her, but Zach approaches and comments that she seems different. Richard intervenes, reminding Zach not to touch her as it violates the rules. In the gym, Christopher and Zach engage in a fight that escalates beyond control, leaving the others confused by their behavior. Both begin experiencing the effects of stopping the drug. They hear strange noises from the ship and head to an observation room, where they encounter another crew member. The three of them discuss what the noise could be, with one suggesting that it might be an alien life form. Sela and Richard meet in his office, where he shows her some dried plants from Earth. Zach and Christopher overhear their conversation and approach the room. Zach becomes jealous when he sees Richard touching Sela's shoulder. When they lose contact with Earth, Richard informs the crew that the transmitter requires repairs. Zach is assigned to accompany Richard while the rest of the crew continues with their duties. As preparations proceed, Zach approaches Sela once more. She explains the suit he'll be wearing, but Zach begins touching her inappropriately. Richard rushes in and pulls Zach away from Sela. When he questions Zach, Zach flees the scene. While searching for Zach, Richard encounters Phoebe, who informs him that Zach has stopped drinking the blue liquid. Soon after, Richard crosses paths with Christopher and learns that he too has stopped taking the drug. They argue, but Richard explains that the drug was designed to prevent the kind of behavior Zach is now exhibiting. Richard asks Christopher to assist with fixing the transmitter, promising that once it's operational, he'll support Christopher when he raises concerns with mission control. As preparations for the spacewalk proceed, the rest of the crew members take their designated positions throughout the ship. Zach heads into the systems room, while Richard and Christopher exit the ship. Christopher begins feeling sensations that are new to him, prompting Richard to keep a close watch on him. Richard fixes one of the transmitter components and then moves on to the second. Inside the ship, the unsettling noises return, causing the crew to grow increasingly uneasy. They scan for any external activity and suddenly spot something on the screen near Richard and Christopher. It strikes Richard, sending him flying away from the ship. The ship experiences a malfunction, leaving everyone uncertain about what just occurred. A fire breaks out in the systems room. Christopher manages to bring Richard back inside, and they rush him to the medical bay. Sela and the medical team attempt to revive Richard, but their efforts are unsuccessful. Later, the crew convenes to discuss the events that transpired, noting the strange creaking sound they heard. After the systems reboot, the crew checks the surveillance archive, only to find that all footage was erased by the fire in the systems room. The crew now needs to select a new chief officer. Zach nominates himself, but the others insist on holding an election. The crew votes, and Christopher is chosen as the new chief officer. Although Zach is jealous, he still offers his congratulations. Christopher's first task as chief is to oversee the transmitter repairs. He also assigns the crew to fix other damage caused by the fire. Repairing the surveillance system is their final priority, so they can review what happened to Richard. They're hopeful the drives remain intact. Sela visits Richard's office, sifting through his pictures and videos, when Christopher shows up at the door. She confides in Christopher that she's supposed to destroy Richard's personal archive, despite her reluctance to do so. She shares Richard's photographs with him, and they discuss the significance of having parents. Christopher asks why Richard confided in her about his life, suspecting they might have been more than friends, but Sela clarifies that Richard was simply feeling lonely. They review his video diary, where Richard expresses his deep belief in the mission and shares how much he cares for them. Christopher searches for the crew and discovers them in the cantina, upset that they are not at their designated posts. Zach explains that they are fixing the refrigerators to prevent food spoilage. Seeing that some food might go bad, he suggests they have a feast to celebrate their new chief officer. Following the meal, Kai instructs everyone not to drink the blue liquid, and they all discard it. Sela and Christopher browse through Richard's videos, laughing and having a good time. Christopher's attraction to her grows stronger. Zach is drawn to Julie, and when he touches her, she reciprocates. The rest of the crew observes them. Later, the crew is seen playfully fighting and running around the ship, enjoying themselves. They all explore Richard's personal archive. Sela discovers them in Richard's quarters and asks them to leave, but they refuse. Zach is the last to depart, informing Sela that Richard is no longer there to protect her. She returns to the medbay and takes a scalpel. Christopher, concerned that Zach might harm Sela, follows him but discovers that Sela is already in the medbay and arrives there before Zach. When Zach arrives, Christopher pretends that he and Sela are being intimate, causing Zach to leave. Sela brandishes the scalpel, confused by his motives. When he claims he's there to help, she tells him he should assist the rest of the crew, as they are becoming unruly. Christopher departs and encounters Zach, warning him to stay away from Sela, just as the strange, crackling noise is heard again. He tracks the noise throughout the ship, with others also hearing it. Kai observes Julie approaching another crewman, which triggers his rage, leading him to punch the crewman away. They engage in a fight. Later, in the cantina, Christopher attempts to restore order, but the crew resists. Out of nowhere, the crewman whom Kai attacked begins assaulting him with a tool. Christopher intervenes by striking the crewman as well. He instructs everyone to tend to Kai and the other crewmen's injuries, and then assemble in the common room. During the meeting, he insists that the fighting must cease and repairs must proceed. Zach challenges him, and some crew members believe they shouldn't be working since they won't reach the end of the mission. Christopher counters that their grandchildren will reach the end and emphasizes the need to support them. Phoebe proposes fixing the surveillance system to investigate the incident, but Zach dismisses her and tells Christopher to be quiet as well. He disregards the rules and attempts to rally support, claiming Christopher is not fit to lead. Zach believes he should be the leader and tries to persuade the others to join his faction, which he argues will be strong enough to confront the alien if it exists. A large portion of the crew follows Zach, but some remain loyal to Christopher. Christopher's group heads to the surveillance room to repair the system, fearing the alien might be present. Christopher enters the room first to investigate. Zach and his followers wander the hallways and arrive at the systems room. Zach and Kai enter the room, unaware that Christopher is already inside. They venture further into the room in search of the alien. Those outside witness something occurring inside, causing Zach and Kai to flee in terror, sealing the room behind them. Later, Zach and Kai inform their group that they were attacked by the alien. Meanwhile, Christopher delivers the surveillance drive to Sela in the medbay. He, Sela, and a few others review the footage. They find footage from the systems room revealing that Zach and Kai killed Richard by electrocuting him and then fabricated the story about the alien. The group decides to remain silent for now while they determine their next steps. Christopher and Sela conceal the drive in her room and discuss Zach. Christopher believes this is their true nature without the drug, but Sela disagrees, arguing that they are different. He expresses concern that the others might not care about the truth, and admits he might not care either. Sela asks him to stay with her. They share a kiss and spend the night together. In the morning, a knock comes at Sela's door. It's Zach, insisting he will enter one way or another. When Sela and Christopher open the door, Zach and Kai invite them to another celebration in the cantina. Christopher's group arrives to find the others already eating. Zach encourages them to help themselves to the food. As they sit down, Zach stands up and declares himself the new chief officer. Suddenly, Christopher rises, approaches a monitor, and plays the footage of the incident. He reveals to everyone that Zach killed Richard and that there is no alien, and Zach has been lying. He reveals to everyone that Zach killed Richard and that there is no alien, explaining that Zach has been lying. He suggests that Zach confine himself to his room while they review the program and determine their course of action. The crew becomes upset, and Zach confesses, claiming he acted to protect them because the alien was inside Richard and Christopher brought it aboard. He persuades the others that the alien is on the ship, concealed within one of them. Zach insists they must locate and eliminate the alien, and everyone agrees. They suspect the crewman from the med bay and begin to pursue him. Christopher joins the chase. Kai strikes first, and soon the others join in, beating the crewmen to death. Christopher leads his group to a secure location on the ship, while Zach's group heads to the med bay to arm themselves. Christopher's group debates their next move, with some members wanting to give up, feeling powerless in the current situation. They consider joining Zach's group to avoid immediate conflict, planning to detain him later since Zach's faction is armed. Sela realizes that Christopher is aware of the weapons hidden in a secret compartment on the ship. Christopher sets out to locate the compartment alone. He opens a compartment and crawls inside, looking for the weapons. When he finally locates it, he is unable to open it, triggering an alarm that Julie and another crewman hear. They hear Christopher inside the compartments and inform Zach. Christopher retrieves tools to open the compartment, only to find that Zach's group has already begun dismantling it upon his return. They manage to open the secret compartment and discover the weapons inside. Kai speculates that the weapons are intended for a future generation, but Zach asserts that they are meant for their current group. Two members from Christopher's group decide to join Zach and his followers. Zach inquires about the whereabouts of the remaining crew members. Sela, Phoebe, and Christopher formulate a plan to approach Zach. He proposes killing Zach, but Phoebe disapproves. Sela monitors them on the screen and observes their approach. They disable the power and reach the room. Sela instructs her group not to resist as Zach's faction barges in and captures them. Sela intervenes while they are dragging Christopher away and requests a private conversation with Zach. She tells Zach she wishes to join his group and be with him, approaching him as she speaks. Zach rejects her, laughing derisively, just as Phoebe arrives and questions their sanity. Phoebe argues that they can choose not to behave as they have. They all tell Phoebe to be quiet. Without warning, Kai kills Phoebe, shocking everyone, including Zach. Zach quickly shifts his focus and pursues Christopher. Sela and Christopher manage to escape, but the others begin searching for them throughout the ship. They take refuge in a vent, but the others swiftly locate it. Zach fires into the vent, with Julie cautioning him about the risk of damaging their food supply. Zach sends a man to check if they are hit, but they manage to escape once more. Out of nowhere, someone fires at them, prompting them to search for weapons. Christopher discovers a fire extinguisher, and when Kai enters the med bay, they incapacitate him, accidentally killing him. Zach quickly locates them and shoots as they flee. They enter an airlock. He covers the airlock's window. As Zach arrives, he fires without delay. Zach is abruptly sucked out into space when the outer hatch opens. He grabs Sela, attempts to close the hatch, struggles with her, and ultimately stabs her with a knife. Christopher pushes Zach out of the hatch but is subsequently pulled into space himself during their struggle. Before Zach can close the hatch, Sela kicks him out. Sela looks for Christopher, waiting for his return, and unexpectedly sees him clinging to the ship. They both return inside and inform the others that Zach is no longer a threat. They lay down their weapons. Later, the entire crew enjoys lunch together in the cantina. Sela inquires of Christopher how they can prevent a similar situation in the future. They revisit some of Richard's recordings, where he remarks that despite the adversities faced on the mission, those who endure are proof that humanity is worth saving. The crew votes once more for a new chief, and Sela is elected. She records a diary entry stating that all decisions will be made by vote from then on, and they will continue to avoid the blue. The crew continues to repair the ship and work together harmoniously over time. Sela is shown pregnant, with Christopher as the father of the baby. The baby is born. A few years later, the child is seen running around the ship and playing with other children. The children grow up aboard the ship while the first generation ages,